I'm stitching out some of the Omni Motion stitches in our menu G. G has got all those sideways motion stitches. It has the letter S foot. Notice how much bigger that foot is. And I've also marked my fabric with the vanishing pin that comes with the Sapphire, because once you get going, especially if you're sewing multiple rows across your fabric, you can't use the little guides down here to help keep you straight. But what you do want to do is just kind of have something to visually keep as the machine is moving side to side, that you are keeping the foot parallel to these lines. Now this particular stitch, as it comes back to the center of a stitch, I actually am stitching right down the middle of this line, and I can see that the center red line is actually coming back and matching up with the purple drawn line. Then that way I know I'm staying on track and not kind of getting slid off to the side. But if I need to, I can just slightly touch it with my fingers. I also want to support my fabric. I want to hold it in front or support it in the back and make sure none of the fabric is dragging on the front of my machine. So I want this to be a very delicate process. This isn't something that you probably want to work on when you're working with batting, because that doesn't really, you don't have the option for the walking foot or the interchangeable dual feed foot to be on, and that doesn't go side to side. Really, this would be the only foot you'd want to use. But here, let's just go ahead. We'll go down to the end here. There's so many pretty stitches. There's the lock and the cut. We'll take a look here. Now, I was expecting this to be a little bit wider stitch, but I'll show you how you can see how wide this stitch is going to be before you actually stitch it out. But here's one more reason to stitch out all your decorative stitches in your machine, so you have an idea how it's going to look. Can you imagine what this would look like with variegated thread? Of course, this stitch is just done as kind of a single quick stitch, where these have a little bit heavier because they're kind of a triple stitch all the way down, so they're going to show up a little bit more distinct. Let's go over to the machine and see how we can look at the different settings for this stitch. When you go into the sewing information area, you're going to see that there is a stitch width here of 21 millimeters. Now, if you take a look on your sewing machine right down here, you're going to have that distance shown of 21 millimeters. So we could see that that stitch was not as wide as, for example, one of the other ones. The very first one I stitched was number 7. And when we go to the sewing information, we see that that one is 31 millimeters wide. And you can kind of see it's in proportion to this foot S. So as we look at the foot, you can see how much bigger that stitch is in relationship to this foot. So I've noticed that most of those are pretty proportional to the foot. So as you change that, you can see the foot either shrinks or gets bigger based on, oh, the snowman. Those are going to be really big. Let's see what number they show up. 28 millimeters wide. How fun would that be to stitch some snowman on your next winter scene that you're making? So take a look. Once again, I highly recommend that you stitch out all these decorative stitches, because they're going to look so much prettier sewn out, and you'll know and be inspired by what to use them on.